Welcome to this explainer. You know, we talk a lot about coffee culture, but have you ever wondered what actually happens when you trade in that glossy corporate polish for gritty, hands-on craft? Today, we're taking a little trip to Tacoma, Washington, specifically down a stretch known as 6th Avenue. We're going to uncover how the hidden physical history of a city quietly dictates its modern culture. We're literally tracing a path from the pavement right beneath your tires straight into the coffee in your cup. It's a story about choosing soot over synergy and raw mechanics over spreadsheets. Let's get into it.
So what does it actually take to leave corporate coffee and start a revolution? This question is really our anchor today. It challenges us to look at the massive leap of faith required to step out of a comfortable, predictable corporate machine and just plunge headfirst into the intense, incredibly demanding world of independent craft. I mean, it's a leap that requires you to fundamentally rethink what a business should look, sound, and honestly, even smell like.
Section 1. Escaping Corporate Coffee and A.J. Anderson's Origin Story.
Okay, let's look at where A.J. started. He was working at Starbucks at the age of 19, right at the absolute dawn of the region's coffee boom. But as the corporate machine got, well, in his eyes, too big, he just walked away. He wasn't interested in managing some global automated supply chain, right? He craved that tactile mastery over the beans. He wanted to feel the heat, smell the caramelization. So he spent his mid-career deeply honing his craft at Queen Anne Coffee. That experience armed him with the precise, hands-on expertise he needed to eventually launch Valhalla Coffee Co. in 2004.
Now, his rebellion against all that corporate sterility needed a physical home, right? That home became Valhalla Coffee Co. With its iconic red paint and that striking mural, he planted his flag on 6th Avenue, a street with a very specific blue-collar, working-class DNA. But to really understand why this specific building on this specific street is so crucial to the story, we actually have to look underground. We have to understand what was there long before the coffee ever poured.
Which brings us to Section 2, the ghosts of 6th Avenue and Tacoma's phantom infrastructure. To get why Valhalla thrives exactly where it is, we have to look at a complete architectural evolution. Back in the 1920s, Tacoma was this huge transit pioneer. They boasted a massive interurban streetcar web that dated all the way back to 1890. It was literally the lifeblood of the city. But by the time the 1950s rolled around, the automobile had aggressively taken over. The built environment completely shifted from that elegant 1912 streetcar web to a much grittier mid-century automotive hub. And that created a totally unique, heavily textured architectural canvas that still exists today.
And you know, that 1912 infrastructure literally impacts your daily commute right now. When they shut down the streetcars in 1938, it was way too expensive to rip up all 125 miles of track. So what did they do? They just paved right over it. Over the decades, those old creosote-socked wooden railway ties slowly rot away under the asphalt, creating these hidden air pockets that suddenly collapse into massive, teeth-rattling potholes. It's basically the city's revenge on your car's suspension. This phantom infrastructure completely dictates modern geometry. It explains why we have these confusing, sweeping intersections built for trolley turning radii, zero setback brick buildings, and random corner stores planted exactly where old transit stops used to be. The past hasn't gone anywhere. We just paved over it and adapted its footprint.
Valhalla's modern identity is still deeply intertwined with this working-class 19th century transit history. They actively champion the local lore. For instance, they host an event called Punched Out, which is a storytelling contest that specifically asks locals to share their stories, myths, and memories of the old trolley line. So they don't just occupy this historic street, they actively embrace its ghosts, making the neighborhood's past a core part of their modern brand.
So why start strictly as a wholesale roaster? This brings us to a really fascinating pivot in A.J. Anderson's strategy. When we think of coffee startups, we almost always assume they begin as these cozy little retail cafes. But A.J. took a much harder, way more intense path that most entrepreneurs actively avoid.
Just think about the stark contrast here. A retail cafe is all about ambiance, right? You've got your indie playlists, the warm lighting, cozy chairs, friendly banter. But wholesale roasting, that is raw, unapologetic industrial manufacturing. You are dealing with massive machinery, monitoring extremely precise thermodynamics, and lugging around heavy bags of green beans. To borrow a brilliant analogy, when you roast wholesale, you are the distillery, not the bartender. You're the source of the product, operating far behind the curtain.
And this is what Tacoma's hands-on craft actually looks like. It's about intense mechanical focus. In the wholesale game, you can't just politely remake a drink if you mess up a pour. If you ruin a massive batch in that roaster, you are literally breaking the supply chain for cafes across the entire region.
The stakes are immense, and honestly, the pressure is completely relentless. Wholesale roasting requires absolute sensory mastery. First, you have to listen super closely over the roaring sound of the machine just to hear the physical crack of the expanding coffee bean. That's a crucial auditory signal that the roast is entering its final delicate phase. Then you're constantly managing heavy, dangerous heat and thick exhaust. And finally, you're battling chaff. That's the dry, papery skin of the bean that flakes off and flies absolutely everywhere during roasting. It is hot, it is messy, and it demands excellence before a single cup is ever poured for a retail customer.
Moving on to Section 3, the Gray Revolution, shifting from industrial mechanics to industrial craft.
But hey, make no mistake, this gritty, unapologetic approach to industrial manufacturing ultimately yields an incredibly refined, flawless product in the cup. The industrial environment doesn't compromise the coffee, it actually tempers it into something spectacular. The stark contrast between a grimy, heavy-duty roasting floor and a delicate, perfectly poured rosette of milk, that's exactly what makes the craft so compelling. And this is where the building itself adds a little magic to the whole operation. There's this unconfirmed local lore that suggests Valhalla's specific address at 3918 6th Avenue used to be a working race car shop. Just imagine that sensory overlap for a second. Heavy grease, polished chrome, and glowing automotive gauges giving way decades later to the rich amber heat of roasted espresso. The smells and the sounds change, for sure, but the spirit of intense physical labor remains exactly the same.
There's this great phrase that really captures the poetry of 6th Avenue. Engines to beans, horsepower to heat, garage to roasting craft. The function changes, but the physical hub remains. Industrial mechanics are seamlessly replaced by industrial craft, which goes to show that buildings have memories, and they tend to attract the exact same kind of energy across completely different eras.
Underneath those thick structural wooden beams sits their heavy industrial San Franciscan roaster. You simply couldn't put a sterile, hyper-polished corporate shop in a space like this. The architecture would violently clash with the vibe. This space holds a greasy mechanical memory right in its raw concrete floors and high ceilings, and it practically demands the kind of high-heat, heavy machinery work that AJ brought to it. It's just a perfect marriage of tenet and structure.
A.J. Anderson's success really proves a fundamental truth. A city is never a blank canvas. When a business opens, it's really just adding a new layer of paint to a highly textured history. Valhalla thrives exactly because A.J. embraced the specific, working-class mechanical DNA of his environment rather than trying to overwrite it with some sanitized corporate aesthetic. So, what future industries of tomorrow are eventually going to be built on top of the spaces we're building today? As you finish up this explainer and head out into your own city, I want to challenge you to look a little closer at your surroundings. Notice those strangely angled buildings, the unexpected corner stores, and yeah, even the teeth-rattling potholes. Ask yourself, what artifacts of our daily routines today will become the mysterious urban clues of 2126? You aren't just navigating a city, you are moving through layers of ghosts. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive. Keep exploring,